Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel says one of 4 bodies handed over by Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire following a wave of fresh fighting. And right-winged US influencer Candace Owens is blocked from entering Australia over her controversial views. Israel has said one of the 4 bodies handed over by Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. As part of the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, Hamas was required to return all 48 remaining hostages. So far, all 20 living hostages and 7 hostages' bodies have been returned. In response, Israel has threatened to restrict aid into Gaza and the reopening of the Rafah crossing. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster Sarah Hewson, who's in Cambridgeshire in the UK, and also Dr. Elie Hindy, chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates, who is, of course, right here in the studio with me. Good evening to Sarah and Dr. Elie. Thank you for joining me.
A pleasure.
Dr. Elie, let's start with you. So we're now about 5 days into this 20-point peace plan that's in place, the ceasefire. Whether they're dead or alive, families have been waiting 2 years desperately for their loved ones in Israel. What impact has this latest return had on the Israeli people themselves?
Definitely on the positive side, the deal altogether seems like a glimpse of hope for both suffering population, regardless of the disproportionality of the suffering, but still we have people suffering on both sides for some kind of a crazy ideological plans. We have to never forget the human aspect of that war, how catastrophic it was, and how hopefully that the hope is coming back to the people who were engaged or involved in this war altogether. On the negative side, this shows us how fragile this peace is or ceasefire is, how unclear are the details, and how much potential for derailing there is on every step of that agreement, on every one of these 20 points. There's a potential of derailing, there's a potential of a collapse and of a return of hostilities. And also one more thing, both sides will try to manipulate and maneuver in order to get some gains here and there, unfortunately having the people stuck in between once again.
And it's a really good point that it's so fragile, and we are technically still in phase 1, and we're trying to see through that phase until we get deeper into the phase 2. But Sarah, we're being told that there may be more food than before the ceasefire, but there's actually been no water and also reports of no electricity. Are the conditions worse now than when we first had the ceasefire back in January?
Well, hopes were so high when this peace deal was agreed, Donald Trump hailing an end to the war. And yet the situation on the ground in Gaza is still incredibly dire. As you described, there is no electricity, there's no water. On the streets themselves, it is very volatile indeed. Gazans report trying to get food and gunfire breaking out. There is looting. And under that 20-point plan, Hamas was to return all the hostages, both living and deceased. And in turn, Israel would open up the borders for aid to flow freely, 600 trucks a day to be going in. Hamas has not returned all of the deceased hostages. As yet, 7 of the bodies have been returned. 8 in total, Hamas says, but one of those, not an Israeli body, returned. And 2 more due to be returned within this next hour. But Israel says Hamas is not keeping up its end of the bargain. So what are the levers that Israel can pull? Well, one of those is aid, and that means it is restricting the flow of aid into Gaza. 300 trucks, half the amount initially planned, being allowed in daily. The Rafah crossing is not open. There is suggestion that it will be open for people tomorrow, but there is no information yet as to when it will open for aid. There are 190,000 tons of aid sitting, waiting at the border to get in. Some agencies talk about an improving picture on the ground, particularly when it comes to access, that they are able to reach areas in Gaza City that they have not been able to reach for a very long time. But others say that red tape is holding them up, that they're not able to get in at all. And I think that's leading to a lot of frustration, that those high hopes are being dashed, and a very fragile sense of this ceasefire. Panic buying now going on in Gaza again, prices surging because people are so concerned that this ceasefire won't hold.
And it's really interesting because earlier I spoke to Brigadier General Yossi Kopawasa, head of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And I did ask him if Israel is limiting aid to the Palestinian people. Take a listen to what he told me.
Well, we don't want to limit the aid, but this is part of the agreement. The aid is conditioned on releasing the hostages and the bodies of the dead hostages. And if this is not going to happen, why are we supposed to do what we are supposed to do in this agreement? There's a clear connection between one and the other. And anyhow, there's no shortage of food and other necessary stuff, necessary material in the Gaza Strip. There's enough. There's more than enough, because we have allowed everything coming in for a long time now.
So, Dr. Elie, in my conversation, he said Israel has allowed enough aid into Gaza. And we also heard the Israeli spokeswoman say the same thing today. And that is the argument, that there's enough aid that's been going into the country, medical supplies, things that are needed. But obviously, we're hearing a different side of the story, because also the UN humanitarian chief says Israel should immediately open Gaza crossing to aid. But the difficulty here is we're still stuck, as we said, in phase 1. Definitely. Where does the movement happen? Because this is, you know, we've been speaking also about Hamas regaining and asserting control within Gaza. Sure. It seems to be that there's a lot of things, moving plates happening at the moment. Again,
it's so precarious, so weak, so fragile altogether. The control inside Gaza now is completely not clear, because we have some kind of a void on the security issue. We have the void on the governance, of course, but we also have a void on simple management of anything, including the distribution of aid, including the proper assessment of the needs and all of these things. So as long as we have this void, unfortunately, this will allow both parties to claim no responsibility for what's happening, or on the opposite, both of them claiming that they're doing everything that they need to do without actually having what needs to be done fulfilled, and the food and the medicine reaching the people it needs to do. And this is all. We're not yet talking about a transfer of government into the new system. We're not talking about reconstruction. If this is so complex, imagine how more complex the other phases of that agreement will be.
Yeah, and Sarah, Dr. Elie makes a good point. It's just a very complex situation at the moment. And when we look at the political atmosphere happening in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu did return to court to testify in his own corruption trial. And we saw those jubilation moments in the Knesset recently, but things seem to have taken a darker turn.
Yeah, and I think that there is increasing discomfort, disgust from some within Israel at those scenes in the Knesset. That feeling of jubilation on the day that the deal was announced and the peace agreement was signed. And yet, after that, now this feeling of discomfort at those scenes of backslapping. Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu praising each other, what great guys they are, what a great job we've done. And yet, let's talk about the people involved in all of this. Those hostages, the living hostages who have returned malnourished, traumatized, who have a very, very, very long road to recovery ahead of them. The families desperately waiting for the bodies of the deceased hostages to return. The purgatory that continues for them as they wait for news. And in Gaza, the situation still dire. Famine confirmed in August of this year. Aid only starting to get in limited amounts, and a very, very serious and unstable situation on the ground in Gaza. And so things are very, very complicated indeed. We're a long way from this feeling like the end of the war and a moment of peace. And that seems a long way off right now.
And I do think that this period and how it will end, it will have the biggest impact on the future of Netanyahu and his government, especially if we are going to an upcoming elections in Israel in the next spring. He will have to prove, he will have to show some real deliverables and not just a nice photo and a nice suggestions of a plan that is not being implemented on the ground.
Yes, and we talk about so many things, and the disarmament of Hamas is another big question hanging over this deal at the moment. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire after an airstrike and ground fighting sent tensions between the South Asian neighbours soaring, killing more than a dozen civilians. Sarah, let's start with you. So border crossings had been closed now for 4 days. Are we likely to see these reopen and bilateral trade resume as this 48-hour ceasefire now has kicked in?
Well, Leigh-Ann, we've just been talking about one fragile ceasefire and on to another between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which came into effect just 7 hours ago. As you said, it is a 48-hour ceasefire in which the hope is that all parties will get around the table and be able to broker some kind of lasting peace. Tensions have been escalating over recent days. Last Thursday, there were explosions reported in Afghanistan, including in the capital, Kabul. Afghanistan retaliated with attacks on Pakistani military posts. And over the weekend, we saw the worst violence since 2021. These are tensions that run along Afghanistan and Pakistan's border, that 1,600-mile frontier, the Durand line. Pakistan believes that the Afghan Taliban are giving safe harbor to the Pakistan and Taliban. They have seen a huge increase in deadly attacks over the past 4 years. 2,500 people killed in the 4 years since the Taliban seized power. There have been 600 attacks this year alone. They feel that the Afghan Taliban are not doing enough about it, and these tensions have been increasing. This ceasefire, pretty precarious. Borders, as you say, Leigh-Ann, closed, trade not flowing between the two countries, but a very, very short ceasefire. And in fact, these two countries can't even agree who it was that called for the ceasefire. They're both saying that the others initiated the attacks, and they're both saying that the other one was the one that called for the ceasefire. So that doesn't really bode well for any kind of agreement at this stage.
Yeah, there's absolutely no agreement on both of those things, like Sarah just said. But Dr. Elie, let's discuss, and I know this is a big question and there's a lot to say about it, but what's the history between the two countries? Because Pakistan was once one of the main backers of the Taliban, and we can't forget that. Where did this relationship go so wrong? Where did everything sour?
Well, as a fact, we know that this relationship has started since the early 1980s. So speaking about more than 3 decades of history, of engagement, of working on and off together and against each other and so on. We know for a fact that the Pakistani intelligence have played together with the CIA and other intelligence in the world, a significant role in countering the Soviet presence in Afghanistan during the 80s, and thus equipping and managing and operating these terrorist cells that we today are calling terrorists. And I think the drift started when Pakistan, along with the majority of the world, decided that no, the monster that we created between brackets in Afghanistan is no longer working in our favor and we need to control it. And then, of course, there was the attempt to establish a different Afghani government that collapsed. But that border has been so active both ways, notably in terms of intelligence and terrorist cells, and even the religious clerics, even the whole system of Taliban goes across the border with the Pakistani Taliban that is definitely designated as a terrorist organization by Pakistan. If the intention is to control the border, it's a very difficult border to control, not only because of the geography, but also because of all the history that it carries on both sides.
It's very, like you said, precarious, difficult situation. But Sarah, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are acting as mediators in all of this.
Yes, the Gulf states mediators in this, and there's an awful lot riding on this in terms of regional stability, given the desire by Al-Qaeda and Islamic State to regain a foothold in the region. Qatar, as you said, and Saudi Arabia playing key roles in this. Saudi Arabia last month signing that defense agreement with Pakistan. An attack on one is an attack on the other. That gives Pakistan a powerful ally, but it also potentially gives Saudi Arabia some leverage over Pakistan. Qatar, of course, the Taliban leadership with its Doha base, so some leverage there. The hope is that the regional partners will be able to bring both sides round the table. And on other nations getting involved, China and Russia calling for a de-escalation. Some may think that's a little bit rich coming from Putin. There is also suggestion that Donald Trump may get involved to try and broker some peace, riding on his success between Israel and Gaza. But a huge amount of attention on this and whether this ceasefire can deliver some kind of agreement and an end to the tensions that we've been seeing escalating.
And let's talk a little bit about Pakistan and the US, Dr. Elie, because we obviously saw the leader of Pakistan saying that when he met Donald Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, he wanted to nominate him for a second Nobel Peace Prize. Ties have been warming between the US and Pakistan.
It has really always been very close. With some changes in Pakistani government, we've seen some drift here and there. But altogether, we can surely say that Pakistan has been quite close to the US in general. On the other hand, we have to remember that Pakistan has been playing a significant role in the Belt and Road of China's strategy in the region, and there are major developments and major interests for China there. On the US side, we saw a big getting together with India that is now seemed to be collapsing. So there's a renewed interest for the US in Pakistan in that sense. And again, we have to remember this is one of the nuclear powers that now has also the strategic agreement with KSA. So many factors come into play here. But I'm almost sure that all the different parties want to stabilize the situation rather than escalate it. I don't think any of the major powers have interest in further escalation on that border.
I did speak to someone in Islamabad a little bit earlier, and they said Pakistan has always wanted peace, and that's what they're working towards. But thank you so much for your thoughts there. Let's move on to another story now. And as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer looks to implement a digital ID card system in the UK, he's hailed India's Aadhaar system as a massive success. During his recent visit to Mumbai, Starmer held a meeting with the co-founder of the Indian tech group who did help deliver the ID database, and that was more than a decade ago. But the system has been met with some criticism. Dr. Elie, let's talk to you at the moment. So India has had the system in for a significant amount of time, for 15 years. How does it currently work in India regarding ID cards. And also, there's been a lot of outcry about them too. So there's two sides to the story.
Definitely. Like every system to put in place, there's the double-edged sword of how much the government will control the life of people, how much will it be able to control the data that it has through these cards. And we have to remember that the Modi's government has been accused by so many parties of manipulating elections, of trying to forcefully control what's happening on the public scene. And this is feared to be just another step in that same direction of having full, rigid control on the Indian population through this new ID card. Having it as something that is optional or something that is partially used for services is one thing, and having it obligatory to all the 1.4 billion people is something else. And again, linking it to everything, it seems, from buying a house to opening a bank account to every kind of services, paying your taxes, receiving benefits. This will make it a full package that will have all the data of every Indian in the hands of the government / a private company that manages the cards also.
And I think that has been some of the criticism for some of the poorest and least educated in India, whose lack of literacy, educational documents has left them unable to get one of these Aadhaar cards, the digital IDs, and then they can't find a job and they can't progress, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Definitely, especially if the lower side of the population, the poorer population, happen to be from certain regions, from certain religions. This takes a whole new dimension also of exclusion from politics and for excluding enemies from the political process and from the public life in general.
And Sarah, it's really interesting because the UK government is actually currently considering ID cards, but there's been a fair bit of backlash over in the UK, hasn't there?
Yes. Now, the UK Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has said today that Britain has lost control of its borders. They're finding it incredibly difficult to stop the boats and the illegal migrant crossings. One of the ways in which they think they're going to tackle this is through a digital ID scheme. And that would come in by the end of this Parliament, so by the end of the decade. And that would make it much harder for illegal migrants to get work, because it will be compulsory for anyone who wants to have a job to have a digital ID card. It's not actually going to be a physical card. It would be a digital ID that you would hold on your phone. Now, it's a fairly limited system at this stage compared to others. They've been looking, as you said, at India. They've been looking at Australia. They've been looking at Estonia. They've been looking at Denmark for examples of where there might be practice that they could take. There's going to be a 3-month consultation, but the government says the aim is that anyone applying for a job would have to show their digital ID. They wouldn't show their papers. They wouldn't have to show their national insurance card, which we currently have. And while this is primarily around cracking down on illegal immigrants, they say there'll be benefits to individuals. You don't have to carry your papers around with you. And there'll be benefits for employers, because it will be far harder for anyone to take on somebody else's identity or to fraudulently apply for a job. But there are, of course, concerns about civil liberties. There are also concerns about the security of that data. At the moment, it won't contain your biometric data. It won't contain your fingerprints. It won't contain your iris scans. It will just be your demographic data, your national insurance number, and for your right to work, for example. But the government doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to these big IT infrastructure schemes, overrunning in terms of timescales, overrunning in terms of cost. And I think as well as the privacy concerns, there are also concerns about how much this is going to cost and whether it really is a priority for this government right now.
Let's talk about something, Dr. Elie. We live in Dubai.
Yep.
We have digital ID cards.
Definitely, and it is connected to every aspect of your life, to your bank account, to your medical, to your visa, to your status, to everything. And it's working quite well. And it enables the government to keep the country secure, to keep things going, and to facilitate all your government operations. So there's surely a positive side to all of this. if it is properly managed, if it is properly controlled by the government with security to your data and all of that. But we have to also keep in mind applying it to 10 million people in a specific context like Dubai or the UAE in general is completely different than 80 plus million in the UK or 1.4 billion in India.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can just say on a personal level, from moving here, it just makes our life so much easier. Because, Sarah, everything's connected to something. We've all got a card. It's on the app. It's all digital. You just basically leave your house. And as long as you have that, you're connected to whatever you need. And it's quite remarkable.
You're not traveling around for your passport or your driving license or your birth certificate or your national insurance card, which, you know, you got given when you were 16 and most of us have lost somewhere. And I think the big concern is about excluding a certain sector of the population who might not have access to a smartphone, particularly the elderly. And the government has taken on that criticism. And that's why it's saying this is about people applying for jobs and people wanting to work in the UK. So if you're a pensioner, you wouldn't be obliged to use this digital ID, but otherwise it is compulsory for all. We will all have it by the end of this Parliament, but fairly limited, a 3-month consultation during which people will get to air those fears and their concerns. But yes, the government putting out the same message as you are, really, Leigh-Ann, that this makes life easier for most people and it will help crack down on illegal migration, they say. Others remain unconvinced.
It's quite interesting because as we speak about it, Dr. Elie, and we find life easier with it because now we're used to having one, but we can't forget that AI, online scams just seem to be becoming more and more prominent in everyday life as things become more sophisticated. And in India, 1.1 billion Indians on the database for this ID card, actually their details were being sold online. So hackers are able to possibly infiltrate this, and that's another concern.
Definitely. The more we rely on technology, the more there are possibilities of every kind of cyber attack, of hacking, of even intentionally selling the data for profit by the companies themselves or hackers in that sense. There's also the danger of being connected to your bank account, and then we have seen all the financial fraud of credit cards or money being withdrawn and all of this. There's definitely a lot of downside as much as the positive, and I guess it always goes back to that check and balance that you have to continue to exercise on the government, on the company that is managing, to make sure the positives outweigh the negatives.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And right-winged influencer Candace Owens has been blocked from entering Australia after the country's High Court backed the government's decision. Officials said the US YouTuber's controversial views would incite discord. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke called it a win for social cohesion, and Owens must now pay the government's legal costs. So, Sarah, Candace Owens, whether you like her, whether you don't like her, whatever the situation is, she hasn't committed a crime at all. So why has she been denied a visa to Australia?
Yeah, this is a controversial story in itself. Candace Owens applied for a visa this time last year to enter Australia for a speaking tour that was due to take place in November of last year. And it was rejected under the character test, which is a provision of the Migration Act. And the concerns were cited that her presence in Australia could incite discord in the community, particularly because of her views on the Holocaust, where she downplayed it, her Islamophobic comments against the LGBTQ plus community, for example, all cited by Tony Burke. The High Court has today upheld that decision. As you say, in Australia, there is an implied freedom, not an absolute right to free speech. So it's different to Australia. And Candace Owens, as a non-Australian citizen, has a lower degree of rights than an Australian citizen might have. But Tony Burke said today that inciting discord might be the way some people make their money, but it's not welcome in Australia. Australia's national interest is best served when Candace Owens is somewhere else. So closing the door on her because of her views. And I just wonder, Leigh-Ann, if one of the views that she expressed during COVID might have played a role in this, where she called for US troops to invade Australia to free its repressed people because of Australia's very tough approach to COVID. And that certainly didn't go down very well.
Dr. Elie, I watch Candace Owens now and again on YouTube. I think many of us do. She is highly controversial. There's no doubt about that. And you've got family members living in Australia. Do you think Australia is just being overly cautious? We know that they have a Liberal government, always has been. And is this just a step too far?
Well, first of all, speaking about Candace, I do like her approach and her things, although it is a bit controversial. I do watch her things because she said things that are not said in different channels or media posts. Regarding her views, I think on the views about Israel and that whole conflict in Gaza, I think she's been able to anger both sides, which says something positive. She's not biased in one way or the other. So the Muslims of Australia are afraid of her Islamophobic points of views, and the Jews of Australia are upset from her views on the current war. But on the Australian side of things, definitely Australia and many countries around the world, but specifically Australia, has never been as divided as it is today, specifically on the issue of the Gaza conflict, but also it feeds into other conflicts and other divisions into society, conservative, woke LGBT community on one side, economic on the other, the issue of Israel and all other things. So Australia has been extremely cautious, and they decided to practically stop any kind of things that could potentially fuel that discourse in the society or cause things. And to be fair, we did see some incidences that we have not seen earlier in Australia. But on the other hand, is your society so fragile that a public speech or a demonstration or a visitor from outside could really threaten the social cohesion of the country?
And Sarah, I would agree with that in some respects, because you can still have a look at Candace Owens on YouTube.
Definitely.
Her channel's still going out. It makes no difference if she's in Australia or not. They can still watch her content.
It could give her some additional visibility also.
Yeah, exactly. And Sarah, I was going to say that.
Her voice. This gives her greater content, and yes, just because she's not turning up to give a talk in an Australian venue doesn't mean that Australian people can't hear her views, because she has her platform on YouTube and on social media. And so I think it's very naive to say that this is protecting social cohesion and that her views are not welcome in Australia. Australia's got precedent for this. Kanye West, Ye, as I think we're meant to call him now, had his visa revoked in July of this year for his song that promoted Nazi ideology. And Candace Owens is the latest in this. But what difference does it really make? Okay, she can't make any money on a speaking circuit in Australia, but you can certainly still hear her views if you want to, and rightly so.
We've managed to ban Djokovic also, don't forget that, due to his position on COVID and on the vaccine.
I absolutely forgot about that. The Australian Open.
Yes.
Of course. Yes. I was actually very upset about that, because we all wanted to see Djokovic play. He was at the height of his career, and obviously they said no because he wouldn't have the vaccination. That was extremely controversial.
Very true. And again, I think for Candace specifically, it could be a meeting point between the two parties, the party who supports Israel, the Liberal Party, the right-wing party, and the Labour governing party. Both of them would not like to hear what Candace has to say.
It's also happening in the US, I suppose we should say, as well, not just Australia, because there have been foreign nationals who've had their visas revoked for appearing to celebrate the killing of Charlie Kirk. So it's also happening in the United States. But for Australia to be doing this, I think it is just amplifying her voice.
Yes, giving her an even bigger platform, indeed.
An even bigger platform.
Sarah, thank you so much, and Dr. Elie. It's that time of the show now where Sarah and Dr. Elie have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. And Dr. Elie, you're going to tell us a story about a lazy detective who's been found out after claiming he was working from home, and he's actually based in the UK. Not a good look for the police force.
Exactly. He's in Durham, one of the cities in the UK. He's been part of the police force for several years, and he's been taking work from home for several months now. The point is that the police has set a system to make sure that the policemen are actually working. So the system on your laptop will actually detect if you're actually using the laptop or simply sitting around your garden or swimming or doing nothing at home. So the guy found a trick around it to actually open the laptop and keep pressing one key just continuously, so to make sure that the laptop is actually recording that he is working. This was, for me, hilarious, not only because of the way he found it around, but also because he is a policeman and he has found a way to move around the law in a very funny way, if I may say.
Sarah, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, what is the point of sitting in front of your laptop, tapping away on the key? Get on and do some work. I mean, the police have got a pretty bad reputation in this country for far more serious reasons than this at the moment, but he is certainly not helping their cause. And it's really quite childish, isn't it? You know, he's employed to do a really important vital job in the community, and he just sits there tapping away on his keyboard. When I was a child, I recorded myself playing the piano, so I didn't need to keep practicing, and I played it so that my parents thought so. But there was a rather lot less at stake there than there is with a police officer.
And you're not a police officer, exactly.
And I'm not a police officer.
It is just a little bit embarrassing, I must say, for the police force. And like you said, their reputation's not great anyway. But Sarah's working from home tonight. She's doing a great job. So kudos to you, Sarah. Sarah, let's get on to your story now. And I love this story. It's basically, what do you make of the word hubby? I had to explain to Dr. Elie what it is. Is it something not self-respecting adults should never say? So basically, what are the words that you hate and just annoy you?
Yeah, this is a debate about the words that really make your skin crawl, that should never be uttered in adult conversation. Among them, shortened forms of words like husband becoming hubby, wife becoming a wifey, savvy bee for Sauvignon Blanc, Jenny Leck for the general election, Cosy lives, the cost of living, hollybobs, that's a real pet hate of mine for holiday, Crimbo, Christmas, of course. Plattijubes was the one that went viral for the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And my absolute pet hate is one that is used in my house all the time, and it is certain to be a trigger and make me really mad, and I think my children do it on purpose anyway, is when they've done something wrong and they say, my bad. No, it's not your bad, it's my fault, or I'm sorry. Why do they do it? Maybe it's a generational thing and I'm too old.
Dr. Elie, I hadn't heard some of those words. Hollybobs is holidays.
I definitely haven't heard many of them.
What word annoys you?
I wouldn't care much, but I know that if I call my wife wifey, I would get a punch in the face, most probably. I mean, there are things that simply feel cringy in a way, but I was wondering if this is, it's definitely in the English language, very contextualized into the English speakers, but then there are similar words in every language. And it's becoming even more controversial with the new generations inventing linguistics and words and symbols that we don't even understand today. When do you drop this, teenage language and actually speak in proper language? This is the question.
Well, I've got a nephew. I don't have a child. He is 14 and he constantly texts me or rings me. And I say, can you explain what you've messaged me? Because I can't read it. And his only comment is, why are you so out of touch?
Exactly.
And I've become that person in life. I always thought I would be in touch. And how sad is it?
When he'll be...
It's quite worrying, isn't it, Leigh-Ann, when we realise just how far removed from it we are. We're speaking a different language.
It makes me sad.
These words are like summaries or shorts for the words. It could still be comprehensible some way. But the words that the new generation are using are completely out of touch with the actual word that it means. And there's no way of understanding that. Yet they understand each other somehow. So I don't know.
You know what word annoys me? The word partner. I don't know why. It sounds really weird, but you know, you might say to someone, oh, do you want to come over for dinner? And they'll be like, yes, I'll bring my partner. Partner in what? Partner in crime? Partner in, you know, just give me some more detail of who this partner is.
It's a neutral word to say it's not a husband, it's not a wife, it's not a girlfriend, it's more, it could be a male, it could be a female, you know.
I don't know who to cater for.
It could also be someone more mature who doesn't want to be called a girlfriend, I guess.
Yeah.
But this all started, Leigh-Ann, because the TV presenter Kate Garraway on Traitors used the word flabbergasted, which I have to say is one of my favourite words to express real shock. And another of my favourites is flibberty-gibbet. So I'm going to try and use those.
What is this?
Flibberty-gibbet is a flighty person. And I think it's very expressive of that.
I loved it when I watched Traitors and they all thought Kate Garraway was a traitor because she did come out and she was like, oh, I'm flabbergasted. And everyone said, who uses that word?
It's exactly what you need it to say.
Yeah.
Flabbergasted.
And I thought, Kate Garraway, she's very, you know, and I was thinking I might use flabbergasted after that because it is a great word.
Leigh-Ann, you should be starting to learn some of these words in Arabic while living in Dubai, right?
This is true, Habibi.
Write it into
This is true. Pardon?
Write it into your scripts for tomorrow.
Yeah, flabbergasted, yeah. Thank you so much to our guest today, journalist and broadcaster Sarah Hewson in Cambridgeshire in the UK, and of course Dr. Elie Hindy, chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates, who's been in the studio with me. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on X. G&T will be coming up next with Tom Burgess-Watson. Goodbye and thank you.